careful of those island boys. Little girl, use your head. They will tear you up like a paper toy. Oh, no, no, no. Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, no, no, no.
Hi, I'm Amanda.
And I'm Rumbi.
Welcome to It's Layered.
We're in a long-distance friendship that started over 20 years ago when we were in high school.
We'll be talking about all things life, love, family, anything and everything else under the sun.
Delve deeper with us because in life, you know, Gine, my layers.
Oh, no, no, no. Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, no, no, no.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of It's Layered. We're in season 5, y'all. Season 5.
Yes, can you believe it?
Yeah, it's crazy to imagine. And we're so excited because today we have a very special guest in the Hize. We've got Dr. Wadzanai Motsi-Mueller. I don't know if I said that right. Please, just sorry to hear.
Rumi just be chopping names now.
Just please correct me. She's, as I mentioned, a doctor. She's currently studying general medicine. She's based out of Austria in Vienna. And she also has an incredible show called Dating Around the World, which is why we brought her on here. Wadzanai, welcome to It's Layered.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. And don't worry about like saying my name wrong. I say it wrong all the time. So yeah. No, honestly, because like here, like the mullah is like pronounced like with the mullah or whatever.
Yeah,
so people always like, yeah, so I say it wrong anyway.
Okay,
yeah, so it's all good. Thank you so much for having me.
We're so excited. We go way back with Wadzanai from high school. Actually, we're just laughing at how far back that was. We won't release too much. Just many years ago. And she's just an incredible person. You'll hear a bit more about what she's doing. So yeah, let's get right into it.
We love to have you on and we love your show, obviously. But can you describe the inspiration behind your YouTube series, Dating Around the World?
Yes, so thank you so much for loving it and for watching it. I would say generally, whatever you do in your life, you also have to look, it's based on your personality and how you are as a person. And I think I was always interested in relationships and love. And I feel that I had a very liberal mother who sort of like encouraged that, you know what I mean? So she wasn't like, I'm scams, wow, whatever. She was like, she's interested in finding out different cultures, different ways of dating in different countries. And I think I did the same thing in my life. So I lived in different countries, and in every country I was in, I did date a person from that country, or maybe someone from another country in that country. And it was very fascinating to find out how much I learned about a different culture just through love, through relationships, the love language. It was just for me something that is maybe more fascinating than it should be, but it was definitely something that was interesting. And then I think when I moved to Austria, and I moved to Austria because I met my husband at an airport. So it's very much sort of like speaking
it's on brand.
It's on brand.
Yeah, it's very on brand.
Exactly. I moved to Austria because I met my husband at the airport. It was a really fun romance story. And then it was kind of like a shock when I moved here. And I think maybe perhaps we'll get into that a bit later. But I was shocked at how little people knew in general about Africa, or even just about, I suppose, other countries that were not European countries. So let's say, for example, one day I was sitting with some women. They were actually Black women, but they'd grown up in the UK and they'd grown up here in Vienna as well. And we were talking about TLC, the 90-Day Fiancé TLC. And they were like, oh my God, Angela, and I don't know if a Nigerian boyfriend, I don't know what his name is. It was basically like they were talking about how ratchet that whole situation was. And, 90-Day Fiancé basically portrays people in the most stereotypical way possible, especially people from developing countries. And I remember that suddenly, I don't know, when they realized, I suppose, that I'm African, the conversation just got a little bit weird because they looked at me and I was agreeing that, oh my God, that's so crazy. And then I think for a second they were like, oh my God, she's African as well. And it was just sort of like an awkwardness. It was like a awkwardness that just came and then it just immediately left. But then it made me realize that they also had like stereotypes, probably about me, probably about my own relationship with my husband.
Of course.
And so and then I thought, probably they think like that because they're also living in their own like sort of like propaganda and everything that's going on here. You know, propaganda is like rife and it's like really, really like a life here in Western Europe as well. And so I was like, let me show them. I'm going to show them that, you know, the different cultures that we come from, especially within the, you know, African society, are so much deeper than whatever is portrayed out there. And yeah, that's where the inspiration came from. Just, I love traveling. It's fun. And also at the same time, I just wanted to, you know, dispel those stereotypes.
That's great. I think you've already touched on my next question, which is how you even came to think of incorporating your love for travel and I guess for dating and understanding the world of dating. How did you conceptually decide? Were you like, okay, next time I go on holiday, I'm just going to do a little bit of investigation? Because your show is more than just chatting to people on the streets. You also talk to different professionals, whether psychologists or, you know what I mean? So like, how do you think of like, okay, I want to debunk these myths. How do I do it? How did you come to...
Well, first of all, I feel like dating and traveling are like two of some of the greatest pleasures in life in general. So I feel like when you combine that, it's just so much fun. And whenever I'm on a holiday, I want to talk to people because when and I know you both know this, if you've lived somewhere or even if you haven't, I don't know, if you're curious, then you sort of like understand the culture from different cultures from a different perspective. Yeah. And so when you travel somewhere and you're only somewhere for like 5 days or 3 days, it almost feels so superficial. Your impressions almost feel so superficial and on the surface that I was craving just getting to know more about those cultures. So I was like, okay, you know what? I need to go out there and ask questions because I like to be, you know, just curious, like in people's business anyway. But I'm joking, not like that. But I wanted to just, not to pry, but I wanted to find out more, but from the people themselves, you know? And so I also thought like my opinion is just my opinion. And whatever people say on the street is just what they say on the street. But let's talk to maybe different people who like professionals who actually get to talk to these people who understand the different layers they are in the society in which they're in so that we can actually get like a full picture of what it's like. That's really why I did that.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's such a layered thing. And I think that's the thing. People just think dating, Romeo and Juliet, or like two people just meet and fall in love. And yes, of course, that can happen. But there's so many things that come into it, like culture, politics, economics, psychology, as you say on your show. How do you personally think all those things, how much of those things affect dating, especially in different countries?
Oh my gosh, I feel like we're Zimbabweans, so we already understand that anyway. I feel like we don't even have to get into it so much. Like, it's just being Zimbabwean, knowing the political situation which you come from, knowing the economic situation which we come from, and then putting all the economic pressure as well. I mean, when I was in Zimbabwe and I was talking to people, what they were just saying is, I can't get married because I can't afford it. Or I can't find someone who wants to marry me because there's lobola. Is there a possibility? Is it possible maybe to just convince the parents to not need lobola so that I can just get married? Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you look at that, you look at how politics affects the economy, which then affects dating. You don't even have to get into politics to understand that the situation in the country is not okay. You just have to ask people, how's your love life? And you'll find it out even in Portugal. They'll be like, oh, well, you know, it's difficult because I can't afford life, you know. And then you find out, okay, fine, the economy's not so good. Then you look at the politics. And so you can touch on so many different topics without necessarily getting so deep into the politics. So some people don't want to do that. So many people don't want to talk about economics. It's boring for them. But maybe you can pay attention to it if you look at it in this way. Maybe you can understand it a bit better. This is what I was thinking. And you know, even if you look at Japan and if you look at China, in China, they have the one-child policy. And I remember I had friends who, this one-child policy caused people to be so strict and so obsessive with the children that they had. So basically, if you had a daughter, you'd be like, you know what, my daughter's not going to get married to anybody who doesn't have enough money for a house or for an apartment. And so I had friends who would fall in love with men, but the minute he couldn't afford to buy an apartment or a house, they'd be like, yeah, I love him, but like, he doesn't have a car and he can't afford to buy a house. And I'm like, okay, this is really deep because it's just like that. Just like that, it's okay. You don't really need to have anything to do with him just because he can't afford it. And that was because also of their politics, there's this one-child policy. And so it really is all interconnected at the end of the day. And even if you look at Sweden, it's a liberal society, very, very, very liberal society. And then so they have this like hyper feminism going on, and I'm a feminist all the way, but Sweden is like a hyper feminist society. So it's like, don't open the door for me. What are you trying to do?
Yeah, what are you doing? They get angry.
Yeah, like, are you saying I couldn't have opened it for myself?
Yeah. And also where marriage is not a big deal anymore. Like it's not even it's not a consideration. I think even here in the Czech Republic, it's not a big. Getting married don't mean nothing really at the end of the day. So,
and it even bleeds into, I mean, coming from a parent point of view, parental leave and stuff. You find the more liberal, like Sweden will have like more parental leave because they believe maternal or paternal, you should both influence. Whereas in the place like Zim, they'll be like, maternity, what? Like, you know,
maternity leave, exactly. This would be
paternity. Imagine paternity leave in Zim.
Oh my God, you're leaving your job. You come back to the job, you'll be replaced, my guy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or just like what you do in the household, right? Like how you operate in the household, what kind of duties, people have. And also in Japan, they're just not having sex because of the fact that they don't have time. They don't have time to have sex. And so this is why the population has gone down. So people are coming home at 10 p.m. They don't have time to have sex. The relationship fractures. Then they open all these different types
stores
of clubs,
like cuddle
cafes.
Yeah, the cuddles. Yeah. Hiring your boyfriend. Yeah.
Or even specific. I mean, it's very, very interesting, the things that they open there. Even their different specific little fetish cafes, it's very fascinating.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating.
It's a great segue. Is there anything that what would you say surprised you the most through the series and filming and talking to people around the world? Because you've been to Tanzania, you've been to Japan, as you've said, you've been to Portugal, you've been to Sweden, you've been to Malta, you've been to Paris. I don't know which other countries I'm missing out, but like you've been to a fair number of places. Ghana as well. What surprised you the most during the series or over the course of your time?
I think I was surprised in general, personally, by myself and how especially when I went to other African countries, how it was such a decolonial process for me.
Wow.
So I feel that was probably the biggest shock, because I didn't know that I was looking at African cultures through the European lens as well. I thought I was above that, but actually I still was. So I feel like that was very shocking for me. And then it was a whole process actually on its own. So then it was like feelings of like shock and then sort of like almost anger that I didn't know all this stuff about these places. And then awe, because I was like, my God, like these cultures, like this African cultures, and I don't want to be like over the top, like these beautiful African cultures, but really actually are so fascinating and so amazing. And I'm just shocked how much we don't know. And so I think I was surprised about how it is an act of revolution generally. If you are a Black person and you're going to tell your own story, or you're actually going to fish stories out from the people in those countries in maybe perhaps a more authentic way, that is already an act of revolution, because whatever is going on is usually like stereotypes and propaganda. And it is really, at the moment right now, like it's a revolution, and I love it because everybody's doing it. It's an act of revolution to tell your story. I was surprised by how much that impacted me and how everybody was just sort of open to it as well.
Isn't it funny? We'll know so much about Western culture and not know much about our next door neighbors.
It's embarrassing.
Like, it's actually quite bad. Like, You know, I think for me, being in Australia, there's obviously a big Asian community here. And sometimes like Westerners would just brush them with the same Asians, you know? But within the Asian community, they all know each other. Like they're like, Filipinos like this. Thai people like this. But like to another level that Africans, we don't have. Like we're almost very colonial mind, very segregated still. And it's like, I won't even know what's happening in Malawi. But when you look on the map, Malawi is not that far from Zim. You know what I mean? But it's like,
not far.
People will be like, what happens in Malawi? And then some people will get offended, first of all. I'm not from Malawi. Like, you know, and it's like, okay, apart from that, do you even know? But you know everything about Sweden and Finland.
Yeah.
You look at the map and you're like,
I had this conversation with a colleague of mine, American, and they were like, oh, how come you know so much? You know, you think after you're colonized, you'd learn more about your African culture, Zimbabwean culture, like you wouldn't watch so much Western media. And then I said, but you need to understand that imperialism, neocolonialism, all these things, the traits of what colonization stood for were never erased. Like it's still heavily ingrained, and you own media for the large majority. And in terms of, you think of quality, you were sold as the quality. Do you understand? So there's so much,
for sure.
Even though we say we are free, the systems were put in place so that it's not easy to just be like, okay, I'm flipping to know everything about, you know, my home or everything around my home. You know, it's not that simple. But I guess the challenge is to do better, like what Wadzi is doing, essentially.
Or to challenge it. Yeah. To even think
what
something's wrong with it. Some people don't.
Oh, thank you, Wads.
You guys are doing that as well. I feel like, I think at least it's great that like, I think everybody's sort of just trying to tell their own stories. And I think it's so important. And to know that, okay, fine, you know, they're like, you know, in Tanzania, they have 126 languages there, 126 languages. And they're so diverse and they're so like, they're just living in like harmony and they're fine. And so I felt like that was something to be admired. And yet, you know, whenever I see Tanzania, I just see the animals, I see people going there, but people are not interested in the people. It's almost like it's a taboo topic, especially here in Europe. It's like, oh, okay. Oh, okay, well, let's talk. Oh, Africa. Oh, it's always like Africa. Oh.
Yes. Oh my God.
Oh. And so I always feel like, don't feel sorry for me. You don't know where I come from. I'm like,
yeah. Or I love the animals. And I'm like, okay, apart from the animals,
bruh.
Obviously you've traveled lots and you've now interviewed people from different walks of life. Were any common themes or ideas around dating that you've noticed?
Yeah, I guess like there are some common themes. I think sex was like a very huge topic, but it's not something I touched on so much because it's always like when you interview people and then they talk about sex, they don't want to be shown on camera. For things like that. So I think there were common themes like with economic stress and pressures and how they affect, you know, people's family life. And also people talk about how finances are a huge reason why people get divorced. But then when you talk about finances, you have to dig deeper into what kind of situation that can create in the home. And in a lot of situations, maybe perhaps just for women, they don't want to have sex with their husbands because they feel like, oh my God, you know, this is stressful. I don't know. But then for men, erectile dysfunction was actually like a huge topic that was already, you know, but it's always like how they communicated it was, then I don't feel like I want to have sex because I'm stressed out because of this financial situation. But actually how that presents itself is as erectile dysfunction. And that was more common than I thought it would actually be. So I would say like the stresses of finances were always everywhere, no matter where you were. Those are common things. And then sex, obviously, being like a common thing. And then I would say that was like the most common.
That's why there's so many ads in Zim for like, let me fix your erection, you know, those random like paper in town. When you see them, they just stick it everywhere and have it placed everywhere, clearly. But they don't really deal with it in a medical or healthy way. But yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And if you would also touch about women as well, it's always like about men and they have erectile dysfunction, but what that does, what the whole cycle is in the family is the whole thing, right? So
wow. Which country do you think, or so far have you related to the most when it comes to dating as a Black Zimbabwean woman? And the least, or both?
Yeah, so I would say like I related to Tanzania the most because I think it's the most similar to Zimbabwe because it's the most similar to Zimbabwe, how Zimbabwe used to be. I feel like Zimbabwe used to be a little bit more of a place of, there's Ubuntu, we're together, we want to be peaceful. And then like because of the economic situation, everybody's just like each to their own, one man for himself, God for us all. And so I feel like Tanzania I related to it in a way, in a nostalgic way. It was very nice to see how everybody was just sort of like, okay, you could walk on the street. You didn't think anybody was going to do anything to you. You never get that feeling, right? And I feel like I related to it the most and I also was like a little bit like, oh my God, we used to be like this. And the least, I don't think I relate to any country like the least in any kind of way, because I feel like when you're a Zimbabwean, I'm Zimbabwean 100%. But because I've lived in so many different places, I feel like I kind of get what everybody's saying. Yeah. I understand it. I understand also like the Swedish. I get it because I also want a partner. I also want to exercise my feminism to the extent that I want. You understand? Yeah. So there's the least, not yet anyway. I probably will go somewhere else and be like, okay, this ain't for me.
Yes, like okay, no.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like,
interview straight onto the plane.
Yeah, I'd be like, this one I tried, but it ain't. I think when I was in Tanzania, there are two different parts, right? In Zanzibar, I would say I related the least to the idea that, like, I mean, I understand like how religion plays a role in relationships. I get it. But for me personally, as a person, I did not really relate to it completely controlling my whole relationship. You get my point. So that was maybe the least of that, yeah.
Yeah, religion's a big one in lots of different cultures when it comes to love as well. Do you see a difference in how Black women are perceived when they're dating from country to country? Or when you go, do you just like blanket look at women, or do you specifically look to see how Black women could be perceived?
I do both. So like I actively try my best to do both, but also be conscious of the fact that I don't also want to box other Black women in a specific group, even though they might just belong there. Everybody's just trying to fight not to belong in some sort of stereotype, in some sort of trauma, and etc. This is what I always find. So I do both things. So I try my best to find Black women who I can ask questions to and find out how they feel, and if they feel that they're treated in any kind of way in the societies. And sometimes you find people who tell you, yes, I am treated differently. And then sometimes you find people say, no, I'm treated completely the same. So it all depends on how far that person is in understanding the trauma that they went through, that they're going through, how far they want to accept it. It's so layered, that conversation for Black women. It's not just a simple question for them. Sometimes it's because sometimes even if you think you're finding familiarity in talking about it, you say like, oh, so how is it dating as a Black woman here? I want to understand. Some people can be very defensive, like, it's fine. I mean, I don't even think about it.
No difference.
No difference. And don't, like almost like don't put me in the group of like your trauma or the trauma that everybody else is going through or that stress, right? And then you'll find some that are maybe okay with it and working with it, and that's how, and they process it out loud and they'll tell you how it is. So I would say there is a difference, 100%. There can't not be a difference, right? Either you're boxed into your stereotype as a Black woman, and there's a difference between Black African women and Black American women.
Standard.
And Black British, yeah.
Black British is like a completely, and even within African women, it's like a spectrum, right? It's like different. But I feel like there's a difference. So if you're African American, even if you're just a Black woman, you're boxed in sometimes if you're in the diaspora, in this box of African American women, that you should speak sort of like in their own vernacular and be like, oh, what are you doing? Like you're going to be dramatic, like you're going to be the person who's in the center of everything, and the men are expecting you to shake your booty. You're going to be so good at it, things like that. And that you're going to be just the one to help him. You're going to be so strong. Or you're boxed into the negative stereotype. You're not attractive enough. You're too dark, especially if you're in Asia. You're just too dark. You're just not good looking enough. Or you're even in India, you're in the lower caste as well. So I think there's definitely a difference of that. But I try my best to not try to focus on that when I talk to the Black women, because I know that they don't want that as well. They try to run away from it.
But it's a reality. And I think what's interesting is you talk about when people see, I've had it here where people, when they hear me speak, they assume that I'm from America or the UK or something like that. People struggle to conceive in their mind that I can hold a conversation and not be from those Western parts of the world. So there's also that. And then if you're African, it's like there's a whole perception of that. And you should be so grateful. Oh, you must be so grateful to be here. And you spoke a little bit about your own experience when dating, like with your husband. It's like people's perceptions of you being an African woman with a non-African man. And it's so layered, as you've said, like there's so many different levels to it. And I can completely, personally, because I live in a predominantly white country and environment. So I have a question for you, because it would be remiss for us to have you on here and not kind of delve into, where you think or what you've seen as being a country that you feel are Black sisters. And I know we keep harping on about our Black sisters, but I feel like if you look at the pyramid of dating, Black women are typically at the bottom. And, so we got to look out for each other. So ladies, I'm looking out for you. Where do you think they would feel most appreciated and seen without the fetishes? No fetishes, fetishes aside.
Without fetishes.
Yeah. Without the fetishes. Or maybe they can wade through the fetishes and like
both, if you know with
with or without, with whichever. Like where should sisters be going? Because we all looking for love.
You want to be loved.
You want to be loved.
Well, I think definitely without fetishes, then you're just, Africa, right? I think African countries, you're going to be appreciated there. No one's going to fetishize you. No one's going to be like, the Zimbabweans, I knew it. No, I mean, maybe, man, who knows? But I feel like you're going to be
on a general,
there anyway. You're going to feel like someone is you're talking maybe on a specific level with somebody, right? Yeah. And you don't have to completely try to break it down for them that you're a person, you have these different layers, and you don't have to remove all the stereotypes from their eyes, So I think maybe it's a bit easy. It could be easier. I don't know. And then I think in Europe, I'd like to say Sweden. The reason I like to say Sweden, because I get the feeling that in Sweden, they have their own way of thinking, in the sense that they think that they are above the general things happening around the world. They think they are above this stereotyping. They think they are above racism. They think they are above
keyword they think though. Keyword they think.
Keyword they think. Exactly. Keyword they think that they are.
Thanks for that booking flights to Sweden.
No. I think they're good looking. Those guys are good looking.
People are like some Vikings.
I'm dead.
They're good looking and they just like, and it's like shocking. It's actually very shocking how many good looking people in Sweden. I was like, what is this water? I need it.
So your perception is like they quite, to use this word, woke. So because of that, they like really try to like
not be the person to be like, oh, your hair.
Exactly.
They educate themselves.
Yeah.
Guys, it sounds like you need to go to Sweden. Rimbi is looking out for you.
I'm
Sweden
looking out
is the
for
country.
y'all.
Exactly. And also maybe I would also go for like a country like probably Germany, even though people are like, oh, Germany, why would you say that? Oh my God, post-Nazi country, which is true. It's all true.
But they're paying for their sins. They've paid for
for the rest of their lives.
Exactly. And Germany is literally right now being the only country that I think has actually kind of said, oh, sorry for the hero massacres. And most German people that I've met personally are willing to sort of educate themselves, already educated about what's going on. So I think you could have a conversation. You could be on a level, but you would be fetishized to some extent.
Amanda's going,
you know what?
She's married to a German.
Married to a German. No, but
you're like, oh yeah,
story time. Remember the first thing my husband said, because you know when you go out, you're thinking, okay, whatever, we've done this. So I'm just gonna go for a few drinks. And then he's like, no, I literally saw you across the room and you're the most beautiful girl there. So I thought, let me try and ask you for a drink. And I remember thinking at the time, he's got lyrics. But I think it's also because as Black women, there's the totem pole. And I just thought, there were other white women there. Why would you, like, it was so far removed from my mind for him to think. He looks around and he still thought a Black girl was so it shows me that he just looks at people, doesn't look at like, whereas, you know, sometimes maybe you are the prettiest Black girl there, but then they'll be like, too hard or too, you know, they won't go there.
Yeah.
So Germans.
I'm with, wow.
Germany or Sweden or Africa.
Germany or Sweden.
Yeah, exactly.
You know why I'm asking, Wadzi? I think because I'm finding through conversation with other Black women, I think there's also a layer of exhaustion sometimes with how we are perceived, even within our environments. Because as much as you will be accepted, because you don't have to have the conversation about what's Aurora, or you know what I mean? But there's another layer which you spoke about, which is your wanting to live out your feminist desires or living in your true feminine energy or being accepted. Do you understand? So there's that other dynamic that isn't always accepted when you are back home. You know what I mean? So it's like this weird dance you're doing. You want to just be seen as you, but you also want to be able. It's very complex.
You want to be able to live. Yeah,
exactly.
It's extremely complex. And I would like to also challenge this hierarchy or this totem pole where Black women are at the bottom, you know, because I genuinely feel that a lot of the statistics that are done predominantly also sometimes looking at the African American situation. And in America, as a Black woman, you are probably at the bottom because there's this historical thing that's going on. But I think, and maybe perhaps it's a colonial thing, who knows? But I really 100% think that we are far from the bottom. I mean, this is what I think.
We're not at the bottom.
Well, so we're not. We're not. And so, so I feel like when your husband saw you and he was like, I saw you and I was like, you're so gorgeous. Of course. I mean, you have beautiful skin, you're glowing, and it's like, you know, if people have their own perceived things based, so I think that we have to separate that sometimes. And I think not separating the African diaspora, not to do that, but I think different African diasporas have got different stories that pertain to racism, and it manifests itself differently everywhere that we are, if you know what I mean. And but I think, of course, in the African American
experience
perspective, it's definitely like Black women are at the bottom of the barrel. But I think if you were to maybe look, maybe it's international too. Like it could be because of Indians.
Well, you know what? I do know a lot of African American women love going to like Ghana now at the moment, and because they do feel seen and appreciated. So it's not, I think sometimes as Black people, our story is told through an African-American lens. Because again, as Rumbi said earlier, there's certain countries, America does control a lot of the media. So when it comes to Black people, even, we hear a lot of the African-American experience. Like we all love hip hop, right? Because it's like, it's like, oh no, maybe I don't. Maybe I like my local music. I'm fine with my sungura. I don't need hip hop. But, it's like people just think, because you're Black, you like Tupac. So it's just one of those things.
It's true. Can I just ask, sorry, Amanda mentioned Ghana. What is that like in Ghana? Because I know a lot of women be like, Ghanaian men be hot as a mother. And like I saw them in your episode, the ones, the Kente.
Kente cloth,
I'm just saying.
No, those men are fine.
They are.
They are so freaking fine. That is true. And I feel like with people from Ghana in general, like especially with the men, I feel like there's like a confidence, but it's not like like a huge, like exuberated confidence that you'd get probably from like a Nigerian man per se. It's sort of like a toned down confidence that is there. And I think that's very attractive for all
The
people.
quiet confidence,
The quiet confidence, yeah. So I feel like Ghana was amazing. And also Ghana had like some sort of like a matriarchal society, at least in other tribes. So I think that was very fascinating to tap into. And so how they look at women in some parts of Ghana is completely different. And I think that's always the narrative you get. You always get, oh, you always still have the feeling that feminism started in Europe. That feminism is somehow a byproduct of European development and industrialization and, fighting for human rights and etc. And it's actually been in Africa, in African societies for so long. Actually, we got it ages ago. And I think it's very nice to show that.
Go Ghana. That's my second home. Yay.
Yeah. It was very fascinating. It was great. I loved it. I loved it.
As we're beginning to wind down for our episode, how do you feel the feedback has been from the viewers of your series?
So I think it's the thing, like what I said, like when you're telling, let's say like an African story, sometimes people feel really seen by that. So I think from the Africans, the feedback has always been like, oh, thank you for actually like doing an episode about my country in a different way, because you can see that there are people living here, right? People are living there in that country. Not everybody's on the street starving. People are having a life. People are doing their thing. They're going around about their life. So I think there's a genuine appreciation for just showing like the normalcy of it all and how fascinating it is. So I think that's been positive. From the European side, it's also been, I felt like in the beginning it was like, I almost got the feeling it was like, okay, you're telling the story from Sweden. The Swedish people are just generally nice, friendly. They're like, okay, great, you're telling it. And then there's also sometimes, if you're telling a story like Portugal, where you're showing like the tougher side of Portugal, and then you're an African person telling the story, it's almost sometimes like, how dare you?
Yeah, who are you? Who be you?
Who be you to tell that story? So, but in general, I've also gotten like thousands of messages asking me how I can help someone meet someone, which is just like, okay, that's interesting.
So Wadzi, the matchmaker.
Well, and it follows on to what.
Exactly. My question then is, any dating advice you can give that you've garnered from the series that you can share with our listeners? Like what would you share
to those 1,000 DMs you're getting?
Yeah, those 1,000 DMs. Wow. Well, generally, I would say, in the context of dating around the world and looking at different cultures, I would say that there are lots of positive and negative things about one's culture when it comes to dating. Even when I look at the Shona culture, and sometimes I look at Lobola, when I look at what's going on in Japan with the issues, or I just think it's important to criticize, of course, your dating culture, but I think it's also so important to also appreciate it as well. So this is sometimes like the advice I would get, because I get the feeling whenever I'm talking to different people, even if it's Japan, and in Japan they don't say I love you to each other, it's an odd thing to say that. And they feel that it's something that should be stopped, because in the Western culture, they say I love you a lot. And so it must mean something. Whereas the acts of service, acts of showing love are more important. So I think it's okay that the Japanese are like that. It's okay that is who they are, because they still show their love in different ways. So I would just like to say people should be okay with their cultures as well. They can try to evolve them, and they should evolve, but it's okay to appreciate your culture, keep it. You don't have to Westernize it more or etc. And as an individual, especially coming from being just a woman, I would say it's important for you to date in a way that is representative of your personality, a way that suits you. So you find some people are okay with being like I'm going to be with one person and I'm going to see how this relationship goes and let's see what happens, and then after 2 years things don't work out, move on to the next one. I was never really like that kind of person, maybe because my mother was always like, don't put all your eggs in one basket until the basket is until you're sure this basket is okay and you're okay, and this egg is fine. You better be checking out the other freaking eggs. And so, but then I also felt that she knew me as well. So she knew my personality as Wadzanai. I felt like I needed to to see what was out there. I needed to compare, because for me, that's the only way I could then choose and say, this is what I want. So I think stay true to yourself when you date. You know what I mean?
And I think that's
just be
really
open
great to hear, because I don't think we're ever told that way. Like, if I think of the dating advice I received, it's just like one person, like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean anything when you're just getting to know people. It's like, you don't say, I'm gonna have one friend and we're gonna do things all together. Like, you meet different people, and then you see, okay, who can be the best friend, who can be the homie, you know what I mean? Like, it's okay, you're just getting to know someone. It's not the end of the world. Yeah,
exactly. And women should definitely, I think, 110% approach men, because you can imagine if you only have 3 men or 4 men approaching you, and you're like, I don't even know who I really want, and then you choose amongst the ones you don't even really want because they're the ones who came to you. You're limiting yourself, you know. So I feel like if you like someone and you think this person could be for me, I feel like you should 110% do it. So I think women should approach men, should take more initiative to do it. And men, when they approach, especially, I mean, European men are fine with it. I think they like it, but African men are like, she's a bit forward, this one.
Yeah, she's forward.
I think they should, exactly, she's forward. But I think they should embrace it. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. Any episodes or future projects we should look out for?
I'm definitely going to go to Greenland.
Oh,
and
amazing.
Yeah, I think Greenland is, I think, like, there are like 50,000 people in Greenland, even less. And it's a very interesting dating scenario going on in Greenland for 50,000 people. You can imagine, or something like
Iceland. Sounds like Harare. Incestuous.
Incestuous, bro. Recycle and repeat.
Everybody dating everybody.
Everybody's dating everybody. Even in, I think in Iceland, they even had an app, right, to try to check, okay, am I related to you though? To double check that. So I think it's interesting to check that out. And I think I want to focus a lot on African countries. I think I'm gonna dig deep and just dive into it, because I think it's necessary to do that. I think it's necessary to find out what's going on. You know, what's going on with, Chad. What's going on in Chad? Like, nobody even knows, So
for sure. I'm also looking forward to if we ever do Zimbabwe, because maybe some of us have, I
did Zimbabwe.
You did Zimbabwe?
She did do it.
Yeah. No. I did just like a part of Zimbabwe, and then I'm like, oh no, I need to wait until things stabilize to release this.
I want to see that. I want to see the full Monty, because I'm like, yo, Zim, because I be hearing stories, y'all.
Yeah, but Mjolo pandemic, there's a Mjolo pandemic. So we talked about economy. Mjolo pandemic is basically people are just sleeping with everybody because people just don't want to commit, No. And the blessers,
commitment requires finances. So
exactly.
If you don't have finances, then you can't commit. Like, how do you?
Yeah.
And the blessers.
The blessers are just insane. And I think going back to Zim, maybe it would be nice to really dig deep and look at, because I found it very fascinating when I had to explain it to somebody else, the culture with Anabamkuru, Anamai Guru, Anatsano, all these different things. And I feel like even though people like to simplify African culture, I realize like we're actually really complicated. Like,
it's not simple.
It's so layered. Yeah.
It's so layered, and it was such a system. It was such a system that kept people together, kept people kind of like in check. And I think it's fascinating to break that down. Find out what that's like as well. So that's the future project. Let's see how that goes.
Well, thank you, Wadzi. This was so good, and like it's so great to see you kind of living out, marrying 2 of your passions together, and like educating us as we go, which is just wonderful. Before we go, could you share your socials about Dating Around the World and where everyone can see them? Please let us know.
Okay. All right. Well, you can find me on Dating Around the World WM on Instagram, Dating Around the World WM, and you can also go on my YouTube channel, Dating Around the World. You can find me there, and I'll be putting up a website soon.
Awesome.
And hopefully helping people meet each other somehow. I don't know.
Yes, girl, you need to be a matchmaker.
Matchmaker, make me a match.
Stayed around the world, yeah.
Exactly. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and to our
Thank
listeners,
you.
as always, thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much, and we'll see you on our very next episode. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.